Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Curl up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
Hey. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom. I'm Callie, and I'm excited to be here today. How are you guys?
Hanging in there today.
I'm a little tired.
Me too.
I slept good last night. I think I just slept really hard.
I think I did the opposite. I dreamed all night.
Yeah. I've gotten into this weird habit in about the last month where the girl who never dreams every single night incredibly vividly, and it's very strange. But
Yeah.
I think we should have an episode on that in the future about all of the weird and crazy dreams we have, because we have some out there ones for sure.
I will
Y'all
say,
remember yours better.
I don't ever dream, and so here just in the last month, not only do I dream every night, I remember all of them, but I will say this. When Taylor Swift came to me and started encouraging me, that was really freaking cool. So, thanks, girl.
All right, so we're moving back into a little bit of a heavier topic this week. This one is tough for me.
Yeah.
Somebody who's listening to our podcast, hey Trey, called and said, "Hey, I'm really conflicted about how to feel about this, and I want to know what you guys think about it. Can you do an episode for me?" And we said, "Ooh, yeah." And we're only a little bit nervous about how it makes us feel and what that says about each of us.
Because we've already had some discussion on this.
Yes.
Yeah, we've talked about it. I don't know that we've talked about it at real length, but we've definitely talked about it some. And Trey, I'm sorry, brother, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to help you make a determination as to which way you should feel about it one way or another, because I'm really torn here as well.
So, our topic today is the assassination of Brian Thompson by Luigi Mangione.
Allegedly.
That's true. That's fair. Although, didn't he confess to it and have a manifesto in his backpack that said all of these things, and they matched all of the shell casings to his ghost gun, and it's all on video?
Yes.
Allegedly.
Fair enough. We shall let the court system due process and let it work itself out that way, but it will certainly be interesting to see. So, do we want to kind of talk really quick about who each of them are? Sorry, Brian.
I think we should because, I think one of the dangers is when you decide someone is the enemy without knowing who they are, or that we dehumanize them or depersonalize them. And so I think we do need to look at both of those men.
Absolutely. Mom, do you want to kind of lead us off on that? I know that you've kind of taken charge on researching them both personally.
So I think the thing that interests me the most about both of these men is that they were both valedictorians in high school. Luigi also valedictorian in college. So we're talking about some very intelligent men, and we'll get into this a little bit later, I suppose. But my overriding question is: could we have resolved this with a conversation? Had a conversation been able to take place, could we have resolved this without a murder? So I think everybody knows Luigi's a good-looking guy, comes from a wealthy family. He's 26 years old, which disturbs me a little bit because I feel like that men are just really coming into their brains about that age. Years ago, people told me your son will, get his brain about 25, 26. So, I think for me, there's a little factor there. He comes from a very prominent family. I have found it absolutely fascinating that he was not a UHC patient. He was not insured by UHC. I believe he was actually a Blue Cross Blue Shield insured. And so that makes it interesting that he chose UHC. He did, however, have some medical issues that seemed like they were very long term, which I would think at his age, if you're talking about between 18 and 26 having debilitating pain, I mean, it talked about to the level of sitting was painful, numbness through, parts of his body and that kind of thing. So, and I think pain changes us, especially uncontrolled pain. And what it sounds like happened is that he eventually was able to have surgery last year, and that resolved a lot of his pain, which also makes this questionable. But he reported brain fog, which could be, medications that he was taking. And I know at my age that brain fog really gets you. I've taken medicines that really do affect you on that. And so I think that's a factor that I think you have to bring in. So he was an avid gamer. He created games when he was young. One of the articles that I read that I just was gobsmacked about is that the San Francisco Police Department interviewed his mom after this occurred, and she stated it might be something she could see him doing. And so that's wild. What we know is that he's facing not only federal charges, but he's facing state charges, and those are different and cumulative. There's some discussion about it's a little bit rare for them to prosecute both at the same time, and then you've got charges in Pennsylvania too. So he's got a slew of charges against him, different kinds of charges. And so that's really interesting. And one of those charges being first degree murder with intent for terrorism, which was new for me. I'd never heard that before. So that's kind of a new charge. But what that would do is give him life without parole. Brian Thompson, on the other hand, also a valedictorian. He was class president. He was homecoming king, athlete. He was all-state trombonist for several years. He was well-liked. Even people that he worked with said that he was personable. He grew up on a farm. His dad was blue-collar grain elevator worker. He got a degree in business administration. He'd worked for UHC for 20 years after Price Waterhouse. He was an accountant really by training. And yet I'm going to say this, and I think that this will make a few people hesitate. His compensation in 21 was $9.6 million. 9.8 in 22 and 10.2 million in 23. And yet his tenure was marked with high rates of denial. And UHC profits increased between 2021 and 2023 from 12 to 16 billion. So there was money there. There was money there, yeah. He had been criticized in 21 by the American Hospital Association because he had planned there was a deal to deny insurance payments for non-critical hospital visits, which I kind of understand, and I say I kind of understand. I don't think that's a denial, but I think you want to try to prevent that. That's not the best use of our medical system that's already kind of a mess. That did go away. They did not do that, or they delayed the rollout, I should say. The U.S. Senate described him as a stain on his leadership for that decision. There was also a physician that was interviewed afterwards who said that his leadership as a CEO had led to a great amount of suffering and loss of life. And so I think that brings us down to where I see most people struggling is that he ultimately was responsible for a number of people either not getting treated, possibly dying. And is he culpable of that?
So really quick, just because I'm curious, Cole, as the only male of this group, Mom mentioned a minute ago talking about a man's brain doesn't really develop until mid-20s. I know you don't have a ton of hindsight there. I'm not trying to call you old by any stretch, but I'm curious, do you think that is true, valid? Where do you kind of fall on that?
Speaking from a personal level, I think that's a difficult thing to see, to kind of watch happen in yourself. But I definitely would agree that, yeah, because I could watch my friends, and I've watched how many of them have, while they may still not be the most wisdom filled individuals, they definitely have more wisdom now than we did when we were in our early 20s. I mean, I think it's just a fact that men's brains continue to develop into their mid 20s. 25, 26 is pretty generally accepted as, yeah, this is kind of when your brain stops developing as a male.
I don't want to say it stops developing, but that's when everything kind of comes together. I think your rationing and comprehension kind of coalesces about that age, 25, 26.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. But even for me, I think that maybe what I have to lean into is that I don't know that I think you're probably right. That's probably when my brain stopped developing, but once my brain was fully developed is when my consciousness began to be able to grow, at least in a more mature way.
A little more rooted
That's
in reality.
I, probably, yeah, a little bit more rational, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I first saw this news break was early that morning that it actually happened, long before they knew who it was, long before we've got all of this information about deny, depose. What were they?
Deny, delay.
Deny, defend, depose, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. Whatever was on the shell casings of these bullets that killed him. So I immediately saw it on Instagram, which is where I get a ton of news from a bunch of independent, very small news sources, journalists and things. And I clicked on the very first one. Hey, the CEO has been shot. He is dead. This is what we know. I mean, and it wasn't 2 hours after this had happened that I had seen it. And I hopped on the comments just because I was curious, like I always am. And they were vicious. In fact, I sent a couple of screenshots to mom and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know any facts about this case. I don't know what is going on. And these people are angry. People who have nothing to do with him, people who don't know him, random people on the internet. And I just was really, really taken aback by the whole thing. I couldn't believe that that's what I was seeing. Every single one was atrocious. And it kind of broke my heart immediately that we as a society could immediately jump to that reaction, especially in terms of an assassination, a shooting, a killing out in the middle of the streets of New York. And so there was actually some polling that has been done since then from Emerson College that I thought was really fascinating. And so it was talking about specifically voters, but it was talking about people by age groups and how different age groups find this more or less acceptable, are more or less tolerant of this being completely acceptable, completely unacceptable. And the one that really got me and struck me, especially given our conversation just now about when your brains are developed as men, was the age group of 18 to 29-year-old men and how much more acceptable this was in their age group versus any other age group out there. And
Like
it truly,
41%, wasn't it?
yes.
So
So
I
it
think
was
it's
kind of
interesting
scary.
that the general population has about, 60, 70% that thinks this is wrong.
Yes.
Reject the killer's actions. So that means 25% of voters have some idea that this could be
Rational.
rationalized.
I don't know that rational is the word I would use here, because rational and acceptable aren't necessarily the same.
That's fair.
Justified.
Yeah.
I think justified is a better.
And I think that's telling that we're looking at 65, 68 to 70% that just can't go there, that can say killing doesn't justify, but that leaves 25, 30, well, 30 plus % that feels like it could be justified.
And that percentage comes from a group of people who don't actually have all of the facts of the case. That is not from the police officers. That is not from detectives. That is not from the FBI. That is not from the judge and jury or the executioner. It is just, hey, what is out there on the internet and what I have educated myself with or not, I have determined this, which I think is really scary.
Yeah, the numbers are frightening.
There's a quote that I came across this week that really kind of, I don't know that I would say that it solidifies my feelings on this. I think it leads me to be a little bit more torn. But this is a quote from Nietzsche. Is it better to outmonster the monster or to be quietly devoured? And so I think that's really what I'm still sitting on and stewing, because I think this fits that situation very, very well.
So I'm gonna give my view. I do not think you can justify selecting someone out of a list of people that I have determined don't meet my criteria and choosing to execute someone. I think that's very random. I also think that it's not taking into consideration any humanity of that individual. And so I and I know what you're saying, Cole. If you look at what they are saying the numbers are under his leadership, there were people who are either still in pain or who have died from lack of care, being denied or delayed by their insurance carrier. And I can't justify that either. And I've been in the healthcare field for 30 plus years. So, and I'm on the patient side. So I understand that frustration. It is a broken system. There's no doubt. I think we would get everybody, 98% of the population would say this is a broken system. It's not working. It's too expensive. It's arbitrary in some regards, in multiple ways. But I still don't think that justifies an execution. And my fear with that is, who gets to choose?
Right.
Who gets to choose who is the monster? And who gets to choose who eats the monster?
What
And
that punishment is.
yes, how that all plays. So I just can't go there because it's just too random for me. And I think it puts us as a society in a predicament of somebody out there gets to choose, and they may choose me. And it may not have any rational reasoning.
Logic.
I mean, I'm sure to him there was logic. This is a really smart kid. I'm sure there was a reasoning behind all of that. From what I've read, he'd been working on this for a while. He had a list, and this seemed to be the most opportune. Am I grateful that we're having this conversation about healthcare? Absolutely, 100%. This is a conversation that needs to happen. But at the same time, my heart bleeds that here were two people who are super intelligent from my perception, super valedictorians. Could we have come to some agreement if we could have brought them together to have a conversation versus one of them choosing to execute the other one?
I think that's part of the problem, though, Mom, is because in our society right now, that wouldn't have been possible. Okay, I shouldn't say it wouldn't have been possible, but it would have been extremely unlikely for that to have occurred.
But I think it's more than that, Cole. I think that you were right when you said impossible, because if it was possible, even unlikely, it would be happening. But it isn't happening.
Because we don't have conversations.
Correct. But why don't we have conversations? We don't have conversations because there is no conversation to be had, because like you said, the system is broken. Mom, you work for a healthcare company who is how big? Ballpark?
Big. Fourth largest in the nation.
And what would it take for you, who's been there for a little while, who has connections within that company, what would it take for you to sit down with your CEO?
I don't
How
think it would
likely is
be.
that?
I don't know.
I don't think it would be easy either. And so to
And
expect that your regular everyday Joe, well, because I'm educated, that makes me different, it isn't happening.
But is the alternative from trying to have a conversation, well, let's just get rid of you?
I'm not saying that either.
well, that really punctuates that quote. Which is better? Is it better to outmonster the monster, or is it better to let the monster devour you?
Surely there is another option in there.
I mean, we can sit here
But
and
that's the problem that I see. We're talking about individuals versus corporations. A corporation legally is treated as a person, but it's not. It doesn't behave like a person. It
But
has
we've
one
punished a
goal:
person.
generate. What's that?
But we've punished a person representative of that corporation. So your logic's not going with you there.
well, first and foremost, we didn't punish a person. A person punished a person. And I think that there's a difference. We didn't collectively, at least I didn't get the memo and the calendar invite that said, hey, we need to make a plan. Let's go murder somebody. But a person killed a person. It was
Yeah,
not a
and
we.
and and here's you're right. It was person to person. It was interpersonal violence, but it was one person who was committing an act of violence against a person who was acting as an entity, whose policies for an entity have generated pain and death.
I don't disagree. But I can't sit here and
Condone it either.
yeah, I can't sit here and condone it. That and I certainly will not sit here and be part of that collective we. I just won't. But
I
Yeah,
get that.
I'm not ready to tout Luigi as a hero, but I'm also not ready to condemn him as a villain.
and I think that that is a perfectly fine view to have. I'm kind of with Mom in that just because you're a villain who did the right thing, just because you're Robin Hood doesn't make you a good guy. But I would say the same thing about Batman. I don't think that Batman is a good guy. Batman may have been utilized to do good things, but he still did. I mean, it's still vigilante justice. And there is too much room for error and cause for concern and opportunity for things to go askew that I can't follow that line of thinking.
Yeah, but I think we have the same problem with the system that we already have in place, so I don't know that it's that much different. It's just one is skewed towards corporation and individuals in power, the other is skewed towards those without.
Which I don't
They're
think is right
grabbing their own
either.
power.
Yeah.
I agree,
And
but I don't know
so,
that one's worse than the other. Just
yeah,
because one is done more on paper and is less visually graphic doesn't make it better or worse to me.
is it
You
less
mean
visually graphic? Or is it
y-
just not represented as such? Because if
I
you
think that's
have,
probably fair.
yeah, I just,
There was
you mean that both of them are villains? Is that what I'm understanding? They're both villains. They're just different types of villains.
one's villain with a pseudo permission and the other is not.
I don't know. I still haven't ironed that one out.
I just feel like if we open up our world to say, hey, when things aren't going the way that you think that they should, it's totally fine for you to take it into your own hands, no matter the cost. Whatever measures you see fit, be my guest. I just can't.
Yeah, but that's the problem is that what that sentiment ties our hands behind our backs as individuals and empowers corporations to take advantage of us because we're not supposed to act violently. So if someone can act violently against us, but on a way that is okay on paper, then we just have to accept that.
Again, I think it goes back to our conversation that we were having in the State of Disunion episode. I think that there is so much wrong with every single facet of this country and a significant standard of leadership that doesn't exist, from the Supreme Court to the White House to the two-party system to vigilante justice on the streets of New York to healthcare CEOs for companies that you don't even belong to.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, I think. This is a symptom of a deeper issue, of a
Yes.
more widespread issue, and it's just one small facet of it.
Yeah.
And so that's still where I'm really torn. Is it better to continue to be a part of that system and try to change it slowly over time, knowing that you may never actually witness the changes that your thoughts and ideas are attempting to implement? Or is it better to violently and abruptly take action to force change within that system so that
Change
do
happens.
you it I mean it kind of goes back to the classic trolley cart philosophy question.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a family member who is tied to one train track, and then you have five strangers who are tied to the other train track, and you're at the switch, and the train is coming.
You get to
Which
choose.
one is
Save the one at the cost of the many, or save the many at the cost of the one. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, UHC disturbs me because they are so big and continue to acquire. And the other part of that is that they represent different portions of that whole medical part. They're payers, they're insurers, they do claims. In my personal opinion, they're too big. And we've allowed them, our Supreme Court has allowed that, the lobbyists have allowed that. I mean, we've allowed that to happen. We've not put in and I know this is going to come up to the robber barons that there were robber barons at one point, but we also put in place things to prevent the robber barons. And then now we've backed away from that, and now we're having
Yeah,
you know
this goes
si-
back to Citizens United, where now those corporations are treated as individuals when it comes to political contributions.
yes,
And so, like you said, we've moved away from that, which has given those entities, those groups of individuals acting as a person, the ability to outspin the American people because there is such a concentration of wealth there and a concentration of ideology.
yes.
And that's part of the bigger problem that this is a symptom of.
So I know it's a slower process, but I think if there was a way for us, and I wish I knew what the magic answer was,
Yeah.
but I think if we want to remain human and remain accountable, then we have to try to have those conversations and make those changes, and we cannot default to violence.
But what happens if we've been trying to have those conversations and we've been trying to make those changes and it's just a losing battle?
When is too much too far?
When is too long?
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of feeling like a mom here, and knowing that in raising kids, you spend years and years and years trying to teach your kids what you think are the right things for them to know, how to be good humans, how to be kind. And you don't, as a parent, just say, this is really hard. It looks like it's going to be impossible, because I can tell you that some days it feels really impossible to raise your kids right. So I can't stop. I mean, if I stop being the kind of parent who wants my kids to be responsible adults, then I have chaos too, and I feel like it's the same thing.
I think it's a little bit different though. Going back to that question, when is too much too much? When is enough enough? Yeah, you tried to raise us the best way that you knew possible, but there were situations where eventually you had to take drastic measures. You had to take a bigger step than trying to have just a calm conversation with us, where you had to escalate to the next level of enforcement to get the picture, to make us get the picture, to emphasize your point enough so that we actually understood it.
Beyond the mom look, huh?
Yeah.
So I pulled up a couple of historical examples of assassinations paired with their aftermath, just because I feel like, again, hindsight is 2020, right? We can look back and say, oh, that was good, that was bad, this was what I learned, this is what I missed, what all of those things. And so I pulled up several different examples that I wanted to kind of run through, and we don't have to run through all of them, but some of the ones I think are really interesting to talk
This
about.
part fascinated me to give this a historical look.
I mean, if we can't use our history to learn from, how good are we? What hope do we have? So I broke them down into essentially like quote unquote positive or perceived positive productive outcomes, negative or destructive outcomes, and more ambiguous outcomes. And so I'm going to run through those. So the first one that I pulled was Julius Caesar. In the Roman senators assassinated Caesar to prevent him from consolidating power as a dictator, which only kind of freaks me out in today's political climate, but we'll save that for a different episode. So the aftermath of that assassination led to the end of the Roman Empire, or the Roman Republic, and the rise of the Roman Empire under Augustus. And while it was initially seen as a defense of democracy, the chaos following the assassination paved the way for even more centralized form of government. And so some really good positive outcomes from that in over the course of history that have been ripple effects from that and the fall of Julius Caesar. Then I'm going to switch it up really quick and go into the negative/destructive outcomes with Abraham Lincoln, who, as we all know, was a United States president in 1865, and John Wilkes Booth assassinated him after the Civil War ended, and that assassination disrupted the Reconstruction efforts and allowed more lenient policies toward the defended Confederacy under Andrew Johnson, exacerbating racial tensions and delaying civil rights progress. So I think that depending on who you are and depending on your lineage and your outcome, there's a lot left to be desired after that assassination.
Well, and there's still a question, even this many years later, of if we had had a man like Lincoln in place who had sympathy for those Confederate states and wanted to reunite the nation, what would have happened if he had remained as the president versus somebody who kind of let the South go wild?
The next one that's in that kind of negative, destructive outcome scenario vein, if you will, I think is John F. Kennedy. He was assassinated right here in Texas by Lee Harvey Oswald, and the aftermath was the intensification of the Cold War anxieties, and that contributed to conspiracy theories that still exist today. And then his progressive vision for civil rights and space exploration slowed without his leadership, and what that looks like and means. And I mean, 1963 was a pretty pivotal time in the civil rights movement in this country and what that looked like, and kind of like you said, the sympathies that he had for that movement and what that could have turned into under his leadership. We'll never know. And then we get into the more kind of ambiguous outcomes, if you will. That sounds like a horrible thing to say about this one, but I'm going to pull up also in that civil rights kind of era was Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated in 1968 by James Earl Ray, a white supremacist, and his death galvanized the civil rights movement, leading to tangible policy changes like the Fair Housing Act. Yet racial inequality still persists today, showing the challenges of achieving his vision for equality. And I mean, I just feel like there's some good that came from that, but also, my gosh, what did we as a country, as a society miss out on by not having a strong, powerful, vocal leader? Mom, you're talking about having those conversations, and whether Luigi and Brian could have sat down. Martin Luther King Jr. was sitting down, was having those conversations, was being threatened, and still persisted. What would that
But
have
what
looked
if
like
we
if
could
he
have
was still here?
continued with what he believed was a peaceful process and not gone to the violence?
Right.
Could it have changed the course of American history?
I just
And I'm still going to go back, and because I said this to y'all earlier, we've potentially lost two very intelligent people in the aftermath of this. Brian Thompson's gone, and Luigi is most likely going to be incarcerated for the rest of his life. We lose. It's that same thing with Martin Luther King Jr. Such a great mind, and we've lost two good minds who maybe could have been turned to accomplish something absolutely amazing.
You're
And yes,
not
it would
wrong.
have been hard. One of the news sources that I look at is Tangle. And the editor there, Isaac, wrote about this. And I think he and I are kind of on the same basis that, murder execution is not the way. And he said he got more flack on this, people calling him out of touch with reality, than anything else that he's ever written.
Mhm.
And he was stymied by that. And I guess to a degree I am, because it comes the same to me. And Cole, I understand what you're saying about the monster, but I do not want to think or believe that there are other ways of eating the monster than there just are.
What is that? One bite at a time?
I mean, it may be several bites from different directions, but if we are going to give up,
Yeah, but isn't eating the monster murder?
I mean, it's just delaying the hardness of it. I mean, the frog in the boiling water is kind of what it sounds like to me that you're talking about. He's completely fine. The water's cold and you slowly heat it up, and then all of a sudden he's not fine anymore. The outcome, the result is the same. The monster still
no,
gets eaten.
I don't think I think in my mind, the monster gets changed. Somehow the monster is changed.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal situation is but in order to do that, you you have to change the way a corporation thinks, which means that you can't. A corporation, an entity like that, has one specific goal: generate profit. Period. That is what a
Maybe
corporation does.
maybe that's what we need to change, because you would think that the healthcare industry, that wouldn't profit wouldn't be the number one goal. People would be the
But
number one goal.
and it would be wonderful if corporations would look at it that way, but that
And
is
some
not.
do.
No, the people who lead those entities think about it that way. The entity itself does not, because that entity has one purpose, and it is to generate profit. And I think some of the leadership of certain entities will look at it from your perspective and say, if we take care of these people, it will generate a profit for us. And others say, the people don't matter, they are simply cash flow, because it's more efficient that way.
Right.
HEB is a prime example of that, though. HEB is a huge corporation, but they pay attention to what's going on around them. They get involved with what's going on with them, and they're still having a profit. It can be done.
Yeah, but what's their percentage? What's their margin? I mean, if they're making a 10% profit versus a corporation who's making a 30 or 40% profit, which one is more efficient, and which one are other entities going to look at to emulate?
Well, and I think HEB is a really interesting and good example, and I also think like Patagonia is an interesting example here. You've got the founder of that company who said, "Wait, hold on. I mean, not to get super political, but Ben and Jerry's is kind of the same way. We want to treat our people better than the quote unquote corporation. We are going to take sacrifices and make sacrifices and put those into place and be okay with that, because I think that that really truly is deciding enough is enough." And what I mean by that is not like, oh, I've had enough, so I'm going to put a stop to this. It is, I don't need exorbitant wealth over anybody else. I can live a regular good life, and that's okay. That's enough, and that is enough for me. And so that means
But
that
that's not
all of
enough
my
for everyone.
employees, no, you're right. It isn't. And I think that that's where things get really hairy. And that's when you really have that situation of the corporation taking over, the corporation becoming the monster. And Mom's talking about maybe the monster can change. It's possible. There are plenty of opportunities out there. There are plenty of examples out there that you can pull up and say, hey, these corporations have decided that money is going to be distributed differently than the norm, then capitalism has told us that it needs to be, and that's okay. That's enough. And I just believe that if there were more people who kind of took that stance, more corporations who are not people, but if more corporations took that stance, that more people would be better off.
I completely agree. I just don't know that that's a realistic outlook. I don't think that you can make everyone kind. Some people aren't.
Yeah.
I don't think you can make everyone generous. Some people aren't. I don't think you can stop some people from being selfish. And so if you put it across the board that all of these entities, or so many of these entities, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with Citizens United and the monopolization of corporations, the growth of these corporations. You have all of these smaller entities that have this outlook that you're talking about that say we're going to stop at enough for us to be comfortable, and the rest we're going to put back into our organization and to the people that supply our organization with this revenue. Those corporations have now exposed themselves to these large entities that don't put those checks on themselves. And oftentimes you see these smaller corporations get gobbled up, and all of this production and all of this power now starts to become more and more concentrated. And it puts us right back in the same scenario where we have these giant entities that have eaten up all of these smaller, quote unquote, good entities, and they're no longer in place to set the tone.
So I asked on Threads the other day, just because of something completely unrelated, what makes a good leader? What is good leadership? And
Service.
to me, I agree. But to me, you're sitting here talking about you can't make everybody kind and you can't make everybody unselfish and all of this, like generous, whatever that all looks like. You're totally right. I couldn't agree more. But for me, that is the role of leadership, of good leadership, and having leaders step in to say, hey, enough is enough and that's enough. And so we're sitting here talking about, I mean, we've talked about voting on this podcast and what that means and how you should vote with your dollars and this and that and the other. And Mom and I were having a conversation just yesterday about, I just don't really understand. Like, I get it conceptually, but in reality, why is Chick-fil-A donating to the GOP? Like, what sense does that make? And how does that work for them? That to me is a sign, a signifier to me, in my heart, in my brain, that isn't good leadership. Not because they don't teach everybody to say my pleasure, but because their outlook in the grand scheme of things is not about people, is not for the good of the general population, of themselves and their workforce. It is greed. That is the goal. And to me, again, I know that I am not everybody, and I 100% agree that you can't make everybody one way. That would be horribly boring. But to me, good leadership is good. They know when enough is enough, and they know to steer the ship in that direction and to be respectful of other people beyond themselves. That's what I want to vote for. That's what I want to choose. That's the people and the businesses that I want to participate in and spend my money at, because that is what I believe.
I don't disagree with you on a lot of that.
Still doesn't make it reality.
Yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
like this comes down to philosophy.
Mhm.
Do you have a philosophy that puts other people in first, or not even first, but other people as important, or a philosophy that says people are expendable?
And
And I think this
that in
answer,
and of itself is a problem, because if you
yes,
and Callie both have the philosophy to say, I want to put everyone on the same level and be as generous and as helpful as I can, and I have the philosophy that I am the most important, now I have the ability to take advantage of you two, and me taking advantage of the two of you for you to fight back contradicts your own philosophy.
Yeah. And that's why I would tell you that greed is the root of all evil. Doesn't make it right. Just what it is.
So we really haven't concluded anything here.
I mean, I don't know that there is a conclusion. That's again why I'm still really torn on this.
I just have such a hard time dehumanizing Brian Thompson, a father, Special Olympics donator, a valedictorian, and putting all of the onus on one individual at the cost of his life.
I don't think that was the goal.
I don't think that was the intent.
It may
I think
not have
that
been,
was
but that's what happened.
sure, but I
And you
Collateral
can't take that
damage.
out. You can't take that out. That's the result. It may not have been the intended result, but that's the result.
sure, but
But
let's go
that
back.
whole argument could be completely flipped and used against Brian Thompson. His intent wasn't to harm people, and his intent and goal wasn't to deny all of these people health care, but he did, and it was. It's the same both ways. I mean, you were talking a minute ago, and okay, I'm going to tangent for just a second, but I'm going to bring it back around, so bear with me.
Well, we couldn't do this podcast without a tangent.
Absolutely. So I got you. I got you covered. And in the most Callie way possible, buy a weird movie. So
Oh, God.
I am sitting here thinking we're talking about all of this, philosophically speaking and everything, in corporations versus people and all of this. And it makes me think of the 2004 movie with Denzel Washington, Man on Fire, where Dakota Fanning's character is kidnapped in Mexico and her bodyguard, Creasy, Denzel Washington, takes it upon himself to go find her. And it's 20 years old, so I don't really feel bad. If you've not seen the movie, tune out now, mute for the next 60, 90 seconds. Okay, maybe 120 because I tend to be long-winded, but I'm going to spoil it here. So the long and the short of it is, because Mom, I don't think you've seen it. So the long and the short of it is, her dad is a high-ranking public official, if I remember correctly, and is having money problems. And so he agrees with the cartel and with all of these bad guys that they're going to kidnap his daughter and get the insurance payout. They're going to split the insurance payout, and he's going to get his daughter back. And Denzel Washington is this drunk, washed up bodyguard who is touched by this little girl. His heart is touched by this little girl. And so they thought that he was going to just kind of roll over and let it all happen. And he turns around and says, nope, I'm going to go find my friend. I'm going to go find this little girl. And so he works through all of the different players and all of the different stages. This is the person who took her, and this is where they took her to, and this is the person who was holding her, and this is all of these different things until he works through the entire mess of a system. And he kills everybody along the way. But he's sitting there at one point. You were talking about, I wish that the monster could change. I hope that the monster could change. There is a point where he has duct taped this man's hands to the steering wheel and slowly is trying to get information out of him. And he's cutting off one finger at a time. And the guy's like, oh, no, I can help you. And he keeps saying to the guy over and over and over, I wish you had more time. I wish you had more time. And I feel like that's kind of the same hope of having this conversation with these healthcare companies, with these insurance companies. I wish they had more time. That's not a threat. I'm not going to murder anybody, but I feel like that's kind of what's going on with this Luigi Mangione thing. He wishes that they had more time, and they don't. So he has taken it into his own hands, and this is the result. And it is not fixing everything, and more little kids were kidnapped after that specific situation in Man on Fire. And he wishes that they had more time, but they don't. Time has run out. And this is the consequence. These are the consequences. You could have taken and done this differently. I mean, the wife, the mom, gets furious when she finds out that the husband was in on this, and it costs them their relationship. It ends up costing the dad his life, if I remember correctly. we can keep wishing for more time. That doesn't bring change. I am, again, not sitting here condoning Luigi Mangione's actions, but God, we have got to do something. We don't have more time.
I do not disagree with you. I do think there is time, and I think that time is precious, and I think that people will suffer in the process of that. But I think if you choose to sanction what Luigi did, then you are sanctioning chaos.
I agree.
And that, I mean, the very nature of chaos is that it's uncontrollable. And so I just think all of a sudden the sacrifices, it gives people permission almost to be vigilantes.
Mhm.
And if we decide that that's okay, then no one is safe.
I agree.
Unless you
Yeah.
act right.
No,
According to who?
Cole. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you act right.
I mean, it's like in your
doesn't.
example earlier. If mom and I feel that we should run our companies this way, all that does is give you the leg up to be able to come after us and exploit those.
Which now opens me up to being assassinated in the middle of a New York City street.
Sure. But by who? Us?
But it's all, yeah, it's also
And
perception.
then we're in the same boat.
Maybe the perception is, that I'm the one who's doing too much. I put a policy in place that wasn't really a good policy because I was just going that direction. And so it doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't have to be a UHC size issue. It could be one that my next door neighbor disagrees with, and vigilante justice is okay. So
Why not?
why not?
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Cole, you can't define it because it's not, you can't say, oh, you can only have vigilante justice against major corporations and their CEOs. It doesn't, there are no lines there. There are no guardrails there. If
Okay,
you
but
allow
to
that
me, we're
kind of
talking about
justice,
two different things here. You're talking about murder versus vigilante justice, which to
that's
me,
the same
those
thing.
not necessarily. Not all murder is vigilante justice.
I will agree with you on that one.
And so if we're talking about, hey, we're doing vigilante justice, and I'm not trying to say that this is how we should do it. I'm just trying to work through my own thoughts on this. And now I've kind of lost it.
Here's kind of what I feel like we're saying. And I'll be really curious if we can all agree. And this is going to sound absolutely asinine. Just because what Luigi Mangione did to Brian Thompson doesn't make it okay, but the results can be okay. It's okay for it to not be okay. And so what I mean by that is I am not sitting here condoning his actions. I'm not condoning the actions of either of them. But I do think that it is okay for us to find progress in this. It's not what I want. It's not what I am hoping for. It's not what I want to participate in. But if we can't find progress in this and we can't utilize the death of these two men, essentially, to be better, to find progress,
garner
to find
change.
solutions, to garner change, then it's all for nothing.
So let me come at it from this angle then. If this had not happened, this is me trying to form a way to verbalize the ends justifying the means, which typically I am not in favor of. This is just a philosophical question for me. This is not me condoning the actions at all. But if this had not occurred, we wouldn't be having this conversation on the level that we're having it right now. The nation wouldn't
I
be
agree.
having this conversation on the level that they're having it right now. And tens of thousands, if not millions of people across our nation would still be lacking the care that they need to not just live, but to live successful, happy, productive lives,
Healthy
lives. And so does that justify Luigi's actions because we are now having this conversation. Does it justify it if it comes to a result that is positive for the individuals involved? And when I say the individuals involved, I mean everyone within the United States who utilizes health insurance, which is most people.
I go back to it's okay for it to not all be okay. It has to be. And that's such a cop-out answer, I know.
Yeah, so with Luigi's actions now, if it takes 5 years to see reform, where without it would have taken 20 years, and 10 years in, we would have had another similar situation. Is this better, or is the other one better because it took longer for that violence to occur on an interpersonal level? So if it takes 20 years and you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are being denied care over that 20 years, or we're now having this conversation and it takes 5 years to see that reform, so less people are denied care in that span, does that justify his actions? Does that?
Again, I don't think that we have to justify his actions for there to be a positive outcome. Is that weird?
Here's what I want to throw at you. Y'all kind of made fun of me talking about the two of them sitting down and having a conversation and what results could have come from that conversation of two really intelligent men. And what you're saying now, Cole, is that he started a conversation.
Yeah.
It just cost somebody their life.
But it was already costing, again.
No, it cost someone their life. And
it was still
if the
costing
goal
the
is to
people's
have
lives before.
If the goal is to have a conversation of change, then let's do that without violence.
But that's
But the
where
violence
I'm stuck.
accelerated the conversation.
That doesn't happen. That's what Callie and I are saying
let's
there.
make it happen.
How?
We have to. Here's my fear. What if we just yell and scream because that's who we are as a nation, and we just yell and scream and we, argue with each other, and not a dang thing changes? Corporations are still big corporations. Brian Thompson's no longer the CEO of UHC, but somebody else will be. And unless there's change made, it doesn't change how they operate as a corporation and the denial rate.
But if nobody's talking about it, then it
seen.
sure is never going to change.
Yeah. There has to be a conversation to generate change.
And
Yeah, but
Luigi
if one of the
instituted
entities
conversation.
refuses to have that conversation, then you can't do anything.
He forced the hand of the conversation here. You guys don't want to talk about it? Fine. And again, not condoning his actions, not condoning that this was the best call. But if we can't find some silver lining in this at the expense of Luigi Mangione and his intelligence and Brian Thompson and everything that he has worked for, then it was all completely useless.
Yeah. And that's an even bigger tragedy.
Yep. And so we have to turn this around, and we have to leverage this and turn it into something so that it isn't for naught.
I still think that leaves you with the same stains. I don't know.
It does. I'm not saying that it eliminates the stains, but those stains are, this is going to sound like I'm glorifying them again. Those stains are character. That's what makes us who we are. We are all going to fall down in life. Every single one of us. Corporations, individuals, babies, everybody falls. And the part that defines you is what you do after the fall. Do you get back up and keep fighting? Do you get back up and keep walking? Or do you just stay down forever? Do you let it kill you? And we have to find a way to get back up. And this fall sucks and is really bad and negative and gross in lots and lots of ways. But if we as a society, as a culture, can't get back up and start walking again and find a way to do that, that's not living. That's death.
So a little weird thought, because, we want to end with that, our segue to that. You talked, Callie, about the immediate reaction on social media. And we questioned what if that would have looked like for even the ones that you mentioned, if social media had been
in play,
prevalent when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, what would that have looked like?
So I did read an article by Time Magazine, and it was called "The Internet Missed the Point on Luigi Mangione." And I wanted to read a little snippet of that because I think that this is where social media specifically is where things kind of go a little haywire. And so I'm going to read that article, just a little piece of it really quick. The internet has always had a voracious appetite for spin. Social media apps are forums where people post hot takes on what's trending rather than waiting for all the facts to emerge and considering all sides before arriving at careful conclusions. Everyone's in competition to come up with the most clever, witty, and even extreme posts to stand out among everyone else creating content about the same person, about whom, despite his digital footprint, we understand so very little. This is how the narratives we create on social media often become far from the reality of the situation, especially complex and confounding ones like this. Yet, the more people see something repeated, the more they believe it, whether or not it's true. In psychology, this is known as the illusory truth effect. As a result, our society's popular understanding of events can become significantly detached from and even at odds with the facts that eventually emerge. So I'm thinking back to 9/11, which I feel like was a previous time in our history 23 years ago where our country had really come together and said, nope, we're not doing this. Nope, we all are in agreement that this was bad and you don't get to act like this and you don't get to treat us like this. So we're coming together more so than lots and lots of other situations since then. And I remember there being attacks on other Arab men, especially, that had absolutely nothing to do with this. And that's 2001. Social media wasn't what it is today by any stretch, but the internet was still very in our lives, less so than now. But the detrimental effects and impacts of that. Well, this is because those guys were Arabs and that's what Arabs do. And that's what every Arab it feels like and says and thinks and believes. So we should go and attack them. And all of these people who were completely innocent, American citizens, even, that were completely innocent, but because they looked away, we've decided that that's the truth. And so it's totally fine to persecute them however we see fit. And that's wrong. And so I was thinking about this and how those political assassinations, political events have taken place in my lifetime and how absolutely terrifying the addition of social media has made them. We have allowed social media has allowed us to think that we're right in being the judge, jury, and executioner. It has opened up our minds to all of these different things. You know, we talked about food recalls. You can't go a single week without some big food recall coming out. Food recalls aren't more prevalent today than they were before. We just know about them differently. Previously, you would get a press release and maybe some news source would pick it up, maybe they wouldn't. Now it's blasted out on the internet and on social media. And so everybody knows that there's listeria in your ice cream or your spinach or whatever, whether it's the brand that you use or you've ever even seen before at the grocery store. Now everybody's worried about listeria in the spinach. That doesn't make it real. And so everybody's sitting here panicking about all of these food recalls that it's just knowledge is power, right? Until it isn't. Ignorance is still bliss, right? And so I just think that the internet reacting to some of these things, can you imagine what would have happened if the internet, social media, Twitter had been around when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated?
It would have been ugly.
It would have been ugly. It would have been ugly and it would have been really fast. I mean, take the George Floyd. This is somebody that nobody knew and didn't have a super upstanding situation in society. And we still said, which I'm not saying is wrong. I'm just saying we decided that that was wrong. We were able to, what is it called when you get everybody together?
Influenced by media.
Sure. All influenced by social media. And I think that goes back to some comments that we've had on this podcast previously, and especially in the AI chatbot one. The internet's scary. It's a really, really scary place.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. And historically speaking, we as a society have not done a very good job of holding up our end of that bargain,
I would agree.
which is just really scary.
There's one more thing that I wanted to read through here because I think on a certain level it accentuates or punctuates what I've been kind of trying to argue here today. Again, I'm not sure that I completely agree with this. It's just something that really kind of struck me when I read it earlier this week. It was a post, I believe, from Tumblr. The user was Asterosian, who made a post. And then there was a response from Insanity's Scribblings, and the post reads, "Do y'all know where the phrase eat the rich comes from? Or do you just repeat it because you heard it elsewhere? It's not a bad thing. I just saw someone say, we never said who would eat the rich, and realized a lot of y'all might not have heard the full quote. It's from Rousseau, and it's, when the people shall have nothing more to eat, they will eat the rich. And well, there's a lot of people with nothing to eat." And the response to this was a poem, and it reads, "The poor cried, we are starving, there is no more bread, and we have nothing to eat. The rich man said, not my problem, you don't work for your bread," as if he did not snatch away the grain by his own greedy hands and create filling bread for his own overflowing mouth. The poor cried, we are dying, there is no more medicine, and we're all ill. The rich man said, not my problem, you don't take care of yourselves, as if he did not buy all the medicine and raise prices so high the gods themselves would not be able to reach. The poor people stopped crying, and the rich man was satisfied, until they came knocking at his door one night, their faces sunken, their flesh decaying, their eyes sightless. They were monsters of the rich man's own making. As they devoured his flesh, the rich man cried, please, spare me. The ravenous zombies said, not our fault you fattened yourself for slaughter.
It just breaks my heart. I think that that is so powerful, especially in the context of this conversation.
Not to say that, again, not to say that his actions were justified, but it also, to me, was a situation that was created by the greed of a corporation.
You know, this nation specifically was founded on the power of the people. And I think that if we're not careful, discounting that power is what gets us in trouble. And you can go and look back historically and watch. The people have big tolerances. But the moment that those tolerances are crossed, the people come out swinging, and it hurts. And I kind of like Mom wanting the monster to change. I wish that there was an opportunity for the people to wield that power in a less dangerous, deadly manner. But sometimes that just isn't the case.
You have to, the best way to fight corporations is with our wallets. But in the current situation, the way that our healthcare and insurance system is set up specifically, we can't fight them with our wallets.
I totally agree. And I mean, I think you can take and apply this exact same logic to so many different facets of our nation right now. The best way to get your voice heard is to vote. And so many people don't feel that their vote matters because they can't vote with their wallets the way that that system was essentially set up. And I did see something the other day. I can't remember where it was, and now I'm going to kind of panic. But I saw something the other day that was talking about the system is not broken. The system is working exactly the way that's designed. That doesn't mean it was designed with us in mind.
100%. Okay, ladies, I need something lighter before we get out of here. Do we have a good news story this week?
Heck yes, we do. So speaking of fighting the system, we here a few episodes ago talked about things I bought and liked, Tyball's Giving Tuesday, and how it is my favorite day of the social media calendar year. I wait for it and anticipate it with fervor, and it is my favorite day. So it happened here a few weeks ago now. And
so you need to say what that is.
okay. So again, Giving Tuesday is an anonymous influencer in Houston who, well, I mean, Giving Tuesday is a thing, right? She just
Right.
happens to take and kind
She's
of
taken her
capitalize on
platform.
it. Yeah, she
Yeah.
takes her platform and says, hey, for Giving Tuesday, we are going to all get together. We're going to rally the troops for Title I schools and teachers. Teachers who are out there fighting the good fight and need some extra help. Let's help them. And so all of these Title I teachers and administrators put together their Amazon wish list. It has no affiliation with Amazon. That's just what has been easiest in the past. Gets to everybody. And they round up all of these Title I teacher wish lists and put them on a big, long spreadsheet, if you will. And so you can go in on Giving Tuesday, they're released, and you can go in and find Title I teachers that speak to you, that are close to you, that are where you grew up, whatever it is. I did one because she had the same name as me, and I'm like, you know what? Here, I got you, girl. I'm gonna cry. We're not supposed to cry on this stinking podcast. And you go and you start fulfilling the needs of these Title I teachers and their classrooms. And it is not, well, we need
Computers are.
Yeah. We
Sometimes
need
it's
socks. And we need coats because our kids don't have coats. And it's really
or
cold
snacks because they don't have
Because-
anything to eat at home.
here. Yeah. They don't, they're underprivileged, unfunded, and school is the only place that they get a meal. And so I want to make sure that they have pads and tampons because they can't afford them on their own. And because I want to make sure that they're taken care of. And so all of these Title I teachers get together and put their list together. And then this influencer account, who it's all about things that she bought and liked. She doesn't take money from corporations. She doesn't do gifts. She doesn't do sponsored posts or anything. It's just things that she bought and liked. Goes and starts, what do you call that?
She organizes it, and then she starts talking to the
Brands.
HEBs and the Tito's vodka and challenging them and individuals, and people can donate from $5 to 10,000.
But you get to choose. So you get to say, hey, I'm picking this one because her little bio resonated with me and I hear her heart in this. And so I want to help her out, or because we have the same name, or because she's in the same town, whatever it is that you choose, because she's at the top of the list, whatever it is. And you go start fulfilling these items and you get to pick, I want to send books, or I want to send socks, or I want to send markers, whatever it is. You can go through and pick out however many you want to contribute and are willing to contribute.
And she's done this for 3-4 years.
I think it's 3 or 4 years. I was just sitting here trying to remember. I know it's at least 3, but she starts.
And how much was spent this year?
The campaign raised $1 million. I can't even say it. The campaign raised $1,928,000. $28,816 for Title I teachers in classrooms.
And that's for the people who wrote her back and said, I spent X.
Yep.
So there's more there, I believe.
Yeah, that's just what has been recorded, what people have submitted to be recorded.
But the really awesome part?
The really awesome part that of that $1,928,816, $1,119,769.38 were from individual contributors, the yous and me's of the world. This isn't from HEB. This isn't from Target or Lysol or whoever, these big, huge corporations. More than half of those donations were given by regular Joes who just wanted to help. And
$1 million difference.
Oh yeah, 800,000. And I'm just blown away at the generosity of people. You know, we sit here and talk about how crazy the economy is right now and how wild this world is and how much hate is in it. And this has nothing to do with any of that. This is just people coming together rallying for the sake of kids, the future of this country, and Title I teachers who are out there doing their very best to be helpful. And
That's
So,
awesome.
is that good news for you?
That is good news for me. That is a much happier topic than what we've been talking about so far this morning.
Well, I'm very curious what Trey's reaction's going to be
yep.
if he makes up his mind or if he's still sitting on the fence.
I don't know if you can make up your mind on something like this.
I was just going to say.
I don't know if making up your mind is right on something like this.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the part that we need to keep going is being uncomfortable with the answer.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
But
All
it will
right,
be
ladies.
very interesting to see what happens in the future of this case and the future of healthcare in this country and insurance in this country. And
Let's hope for change.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I am hoping for the best.
Yeah.
That it all
Let's hope
means
for some
something.
change. Love you guys.
Love you
Love
too.
you guys. Thanks, y'all.